record.
All right, thank you very much. So sorry, Mr. Friday, for adding an extra 4 minutes again to the 4 minutes I had requested for. My apologies. Good morning, everyone, once again, and welcome to this morning session of the Policy Hackathon. I am sure that you all had a fantastic time from yesterday's section with our keynotes speaker. It was quite an insightful section. So we'll go right into today's session. Our speaker and facilitator for today is already with us. He came very, very early. Thank you very much, Mr. Friday, for obliging us. And thank you so much for your patience on the call today. So today we are going to be looking at the topic promoting transparent and accountable governance in Nigeria. And the aim of the session today is just to help us, reflect on how to, get our system to be accountable. Nigeria currently ranks 154, 180 in the Corruption Perception Index. So how do we make governance in Nigeria more accountable? And what role as young people can we play to bring about this accountability? And today we have a very seasoned facilitator who is going to speak to us on the subject of promoting transparency. Mr. Friday Odeh is a development expert with over 10 years of professional expertise working in Nigeria on transparency and accountability issues in government. He has seen the importance of accountability as a critical driver of progress in each of these sectors. And he is building a movement for active citizens and responsible leaders with a focus on behavior change and making governance work through the Accountability Lab as the country director based in Abuja, Nigeria. Odeh holds a BSc in mathematics with a postgraduate diploma in information technology. Ladies and gentlemen, please use your digital hand clap, or if you can switch on your video and clap to welcome our speaker, Mr. Friday Odeh. Mr. Friday, you have the floor, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. I'm just going to see if this works. So if you see me on the road, you don't beat me up. This is my face. But yes, it would be good to connect with colleagues and friends. And I want to permit me to take off the camera as well. I'm home on a Saturday and I'm not sure what the internet holds for us, so we don't get disrupted.
That's very okay. Thank you.
But yes, I want to use this medium to commend you, and I see Ebenezer is also on the call, and the Policy Shapers team. You guys are doing like really amazing work, which I'm a big fan of. And a big supporter. Ebenezer, please always reach out in ways we can support. I know you sent an email a couple of times, but I've been quite busy. But yes, please try to follow up so we can continue this amazing work which you are doing. And also, well done. I saw the visit to the permanent secretary to the Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That was really amazing. As we continue to push on every side, yes, please let us know how we can support. So as Mr. Stephen has introduced, I work for the Accountability Lab. I work as the country director, and I've been doing this work since 2017, but previously I'd worked with spaces like Save the Children and Association for Positive Youth Living with HIV, and a couple of support I've provided for other civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations across my years of experience on the job. And just interestingly to just mention, I rarely say this, but just to also inspire us to continue the work we do. When I was working on my previous job, I'd worked in the Northeast for a couple of years, and seeing the support that was provided to citizens from that region. And one of the things that caught my interest was how international donors and funders provide support to international organizations here in Nigeria and civil society organizations to do the work in the community and the grassroots. But at some point, one key program was food security and livelihood, where funds are being provided to distribute food in this community. I worked with child protection, but I had that connection with nutrition, with health, and FSL programs. In providing service to this community, I was struck at one of the findings where people who work for this civil society organization at the grassroots in Borno State, in Adamawa, in Yobe, used to sell food, meal, they call it meal tickets, which we provide to the community members. You find out staff have to sell those food tickets for sex. That's a finding which you can go and verify. Another thing is where you get meal tickets and it's being sold to the community members who don't even have access to food. Another step to this was the government agency providing emergency services at the state level and at the national level. You find out people who were, let me use the Nigerian word, cornering people who don't have food. Food that is meant for the community, you find people cornering them for other causes, which was, for me, was quite disturbing. And at that point was when I found out we need more accountability in the work we do down at the grassroots, beyond governments, in private sector organizations, in businesses, and everything we do. If we can only become there's one thing to become transparent, there's another thing to become accountable, which I'll talk about in the course of this conversation. But that was my interest on why I moved into this sector, to ensure that we are able to develop people who have people of good repute and people who are accountable, people who are able to do the right thing, so we can also build a society which serves all of us. Just jumping on to the next, for me, like we all know, since the demise of the military dictatorship in the late 1990s, Nigeria has made remarkable democratic progress, which we can attest to. Even that we know that is quite slow and not as progressive as we want. There's still widespread corruption, which hampers the progress and development of Nigeria as a whole, which in many respects presents its biggest challenges around policies, which I also commend Ebenezer for even taking this bold step to feed into the ecosystem, to supporting us to having this change as well. And this is one of the biggest threats to stability and development in Nigeria. The contemporary Nigerian society has been plagued, reading with divergent problems, which we know. I don't want to mention, but we know from insecurity to inflation and all of that that is happening to us at the moment. Corruption tops the list, but it has become a cliche now. We don't even know what that means anymore, but we all hear this on a daily basis. Another thing that happens is failed contracts. We've seen infrastructures from funds which have been collected by this current administration and not properly implemented, contracts which have failed. We saw the recent MTEF presentation by the Minister of Finance. The country is actually broke, but I will not go into that as not my field of specialty, but I'll talk about that in terms of accountability. These have been orchestrated by insincerity the organization I work for. We're big on accountability. That's not why we're called Accountability Lab, but we work to make governance work for citizens. And key for us is how do we support active citizens, responsible leaders, and work with accountable institutions. But in all of this, we've seen insincerity of public office holders who have powers to change things, but they still make things remain the way they are across the country, resulting in the current public trust dilemma. We know there's lack of trust between citizens and government officials, and the gap is widening almost on a daily basis, and if possible, at every minute as we see it. The need for accountability and transparency within the present Nigeria seeks to provide a pathway for the effective and efficient services and performance delivery, more like service delivery that guarantees public entitlement to the dividends of responsible democratic governance. like Mr. Stephen was mentioning earlier about the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, which we rank 154 out of 180 countries, Nigeria has not also done well across various indexes and indices of governance. From the World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index, we rank 121 out of 139 countries. The Index of Public Integrity in 2021, all of these are 2021 indexes. In Index of Public Integrity, we rank 102 out of 114 countries. The Ibrahim Index of African Governance, we rank 34 out of 54 countries in Africa. This is an African indices. The current government has continued to demonstrate an inability to address these issues in meaningful ways, and inclusion at all levels remains a huge problem. While there are incredible young people and vibrant civil society in Nigeria that understand the solution to these challenges, like all of us have this fantastic idea on working around these policies, our voices are rarely heard. And I think we can begin to increase the sound of how this sounds in our ears or how this sounds in the ears of politicians. We need our voices to be heard. Yesterday, congrats Ebenezer as well for making this happen at this time. I think this is an important time for us to also raise our voices. I was speaking to myself yesterday and I'm like, oh, Ebenezer is doing great work with his team. I'm not sure I want to still stand as a youth, but we hide under the umbrella of young people. And interestingly, I've been seeing videos across social media from several political aspirants, presidential aspirants, who are trying to engage with young people as a means of their political campaign. But I was speaking to Shemun the other day from Budget, and I said to him, it's interesting none of them is mentioning accountability in any of their campaign, and they want to engage with young people. And we know that that gap still stays in between young people and the government. But how do we bridge this gap in terms of promoting accountability and transparency through the policy hackathon? But however, good governance fundamentally implies accountability, which we all seek and we all press for. A state must be accountable to those affected by the decision made and policies which are implemented. I probably try to stay on policies so we can get a clear understanding on how this affects decision-making processes and how we want to engage in all of this. But basically, accountability is more around decision-making and how we hold people accountable and to these decisions which they make and the policies which they implement affect us. The next, which I see, is accountability presumes transparency. But please stop me if you have any question. I'll be glad to take that. I'm just trying to create a distinction between accountability and transparency, so we have a better clarity of how this works and how we can engage in the process of making governance work for all of us. Transparency, which simply means that the states must always, that states must always strive to make decision-making process as open as possible so that those affected, which is you and I, as young people, as youth, as citizens of Nigeria, so we'll get the understanding of what government is doing and why and how it affects us. Most importantly, transparency requires that government must always justify its decisions and actions to citizens. That's why we stand in the place of the Office of the Citizens to hold them accountable. Most especially, one of the leading organizations, Transparency International, has defined transparency as shedding lights on rules, plans, processes, and actions. It is knowing the 5 Ws, which most of us are familiar with. Knowing the who makes the decision, why the decision was made, and what that decision is about, and how that decision is being made, and how much, if most importantly, is being spent across these processes. This generally or broadly, transparency ensures public officials, civil servants, managers, board members, cutting across private sector, public sector, civil society organization, the media, even board members in our several organizations, to act visibly and understandably and report on their activities. This therefore implies that the general public can hold them accountable. Do I have the chance to make this more interactive if I could ask a question on what we think the difference is, or the line, how do you draw the line between transparency and accountability? Like practical terms, in terms of what happens in an office, in terms of finances or funds or behaviors, or if anybody can just, maybe one or two persons can just say what you think about the difference between transparency and accountability before we move on to other things.
Yeah, who wants to give that a try? Please go ahead and unmute yourself, and then Caleb, do you want to give it a try?
To me, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Odeh from Accountability Lab.
Okay.
To me, transparency is when you are open. That's when you are open. Then accountability is when you are, let's say, when you're giving something and you have details. That's real details to what you're giving. Don't know how to put it, but that's my own view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caleb. John.
All right, thank you, sir, for the presentation so far. So I would say that transparency is when there is no gray area in your operations. I would see transparency like an external factor where people from the outside sees that, oh, this particular organization, this particular institute, they are transparent with their operations. While accountability is more or less like an internal factor. Okay, like, are you accountable to your boss? Are you accountable to auditors, external auditors, internal auditors? Are you accountable to several other players in the industry? So I think from my own point of view, that is what I see as accountability and transparency.
Thank you very much, guys. That's very helpful. So I'll give you a practical example on, maybe I ask a question again. So when you put, I like the fact that I think you made reference to auditors rather. So the fact that the government produces an audit report reflects transparency, like this is what the figure says and this is what it is. But on the other hand, once you engage basically as active citizens in the process, we expect the government to be responsible leaders in that space and become accountable institutions when we ask questions as Nigerian citizens. So if they present, so I'm going to go through three core areas. Like, first of all, there's elections. Yes, we all know that. Elections elects people into office of the public offices. Then you find that when the president is elected, there is a budgetary processes which goes through National Assembly and all of that. From budgetary processes, you have procurement and contracting processes, which happens as a result of the national budgets or state budgets or local government budget, if there's any. Then you move on from that procurement and contracting processes, which leads us to the audit process on how citizens, how they report on all of what has been done. In the process, we expect, in the process of accountability and transparency, it's for citizens to engage with government, that relationship, including the private sector. But once you find an audit report being produced, or a budget being produced, or a procurement process being published, there's transparency in all of this process, which we clearly understand, but the question remains that government is transparent, yes, by providing all of that. But the next step into engagement is, are they accountable when we ask questions? Basically, to provide more understanding, like we had said in the introductory parts about a state must be accountable to those affected by their decisions made and policies implemented. The states must always strive to make decision-making processes as open as possible so that we citizens, we get the understanding of how and what government is doing and why. So that is why on one part there's transparency and the other part there's accountability, which we find it difficult while working in the space over the years, is why governments are not accountable. So if you ask them questions around, let me see, not sure what procurement process I'm going to use around. So you have the what do you call this thing in National Assembly, the constituency projects. They always tell you like this person has spent 20 million, which is budgeted for. But once you ask questions on demanding accountability, that is one of the major areas that the problem arises. So how do we go about promoting some of these issues, promoting accountability and transparency in these processes? Nigeria generally, like we know, activism and collective efforts to combat corruption have risen dramatically in recent years, and we continue to build on this collective action and efforts from different civil society, like at the Accountability Lab, at Civic Hive as well, budgets, and other programs who are encouraging young people to come up with great ideas, and we provide support to them. So we can also build this, the collective efforts and increase the ecosystem space, and also give chance for more innovative solutions to come into the space to addressing some of these challenges we have found that happens around. So you have, like I said, activism, collective efforts have risen in recent years. There's now a combined range of new civil society, like I mentioned, civil society organizations working to push reforms more around the movement for transparency and accountability, which we see emerging. So this is the argument we put on the table. While you are providing food for communities, like in the Northeast, or communities ravaged by insecurity, or the humanitarian response, like we call it in the Northeast, which is expanding. While you continue to provide those services, we need to start talking about promoting accountability and transparency in all of these processes, so we can all have a society which serves our purpose. Otherwise, you find people doing things, and it's one of the key things which I have a passion for, around how people behave, which takes us into conversations like behaviors, how we apply integrity to processes, how we also apply how the social norms have shifted into negative ways of behaving generally. One of the things we say about good governance, sorry, if Ebenezer, forgive me, and your team as well, I want to see, just use the reaction on raising your hand. You can drop the hand after you raise your hand. Have you ever had to travel out of Nigeria to maybe, let me say, Europe, US, blah, 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 and all of that? If you can just raise your hand. This is number one. Okay, number two, I see 3 hands. 4 hands. Interesting. Somebody this is laughing. But yeah, you can lower your hand, sorry. So the purpose of asking that question is sometimes when you travel out of the country, there are ways in which people behave. Like, you will not shunt a line, you will not jump the queue. You will actually, sometimes payments are made based on what you actually, what you purchased. Tips are given in special situations, but you find out behaviors here in Nigeria are quite different. So one of the things we say around good health services and quality education when we travel out is, people who are in Nigeria have not, permit me to say this, but don't go and quote me anywhere. People who have lived in Nigeria for quite some time, it has become a norm that let me not say bribery, I'm not sure I like that word, but facilitation payments, meaning for you to get a contract, you have to drop some money. For you to do, I'm not even sure those experiences, but somehow, like the police, it becomes like how they search your phones. But these are like abnormal social norms which have been instituted in Nigeria. But once you travel, in as much as they have other kind of behaviors or social norms, you find out accountability and transparency is more like a bedrock on what their society has been built with. I'm not saying corrupt practices don't exist in those countries. But I'm just saying this in terms of behaviors. Yes, corruption is almost everywhere, like we saw in recent times in the UK. But all of these things happen. But I'm just saying in terms of behavior, how they've more like instituted some of these things in public offices where people are accountable and transparent at lower level. But here it's more like different. So my thought is sometimes you travel out there, you find these things and you try to bring it back there, like best practices, but it becomes tough for all of us. But going forward in promoting transparency and accountability, first of all, I see there's an opportunity which for collective action around agenda setting, which is more around influencing the prioritization of issues on the public agenda. And this looks at civil society trying to keep transparency issues and accountability issues related to the petroleum industry of legislation agenda, leading to the passage of the Petroleum Industry Governance Act, which is now in existence. We've seen that due to advocacy around these issues, one of the key drivers of corruption is found in the oil and gas sector over the years. So if you look at government in, government out, that has been like top on the agenda, which we've not seen transparency, or we've seen transparency, but we've not seen accountability on how monies are being spent, how monies are being appropriated from that space. So first of all, we've seen a couple of collective action around civil society organizations promoting accountability and transparency in that space by setting agenda. Secondly is strategic support to state institutions, consulting government officials on initiatives that benefit citizens. So we've seen Ebenezer and his team and I, and a couple of other young people. This year, we made it a point of contact to ensure that the selection of so we had an Open Government Nigeria Youth Network, which we instituted this year. We started conversations with Ebenezer and Baturi as well a couple of months ago, and that has come to pass. OGP is more like a co-creation process between government, civil society, and private sector to ensure like we are developing, co-creating solutions around transparency and accountability. And this is one of it, which has worked with governments, but we're still pushing on that to see how we can strategically support these states, institution. When I say states, more like federal level, subnational level, and all of that. We've seen that as an example of how we're pushing for that, and hopefully we will keep pushing. We still talk about non-violent collective action in terms of promoting transparency and accountability, where we've seen protests in recent times, like the NSAS, organizing and recruiting to build resistance against corruption. But unfortunately, we've seen how that has turned out in recent times, how the government now defines non-violent collective action, where there's always a pro-government organization who stands to counter whatever narrative we are bringing out there. I think it was early this year, I guess. Matthew Page, one of my one of the people I follow on social media, has written. He's an associate with Chatham House. They had written a publication sometimes early this year. If a couple of us saw that, about 300, if it was 300 or 360 pro-government accountability organizations, which means fake governments, fake civil society organizations who are claiming to be pro-accountability organizations. So some of these challenges we face when we do this work are like those people come up and government is trying to frustrate non-violent collective action. Enough is Enough is one of the organizations I also commend, which organizes Rally, the 2011 petroleum subsidy, the NSAS movement as well. They've been very instrumental. But yes, we'll keep doing that, organizing and recruiting to build resistance against corruption. Another way is, this links to the work Ebenezer is doing, policy scrutiny and analysis. Analyzing policies to determine fitness and monitoring the implementation process, which is one of the things that links to our work around active citizens and why we need to ask questions and engage in the fight, not the fight for corruption for me, but promoting transparency and accountability in Nigeria. Civil society have been working around this, reviewing bills, regulating NGOs in recent times, which we had seen. Like there's always a pushback on this, which is one of the key areas which we've identified around. So while other civil society organizations provide services in terms of food, like my previous job, food security, health, you find out nobody goes against them. But with civil society organizations working particularly around accountability and transparency issues, we always find a pushback from governments, like the civil society bill, the NGO bill, and all those bills trying to limit our work because we are demanding accountability from government. Another one we have seen, like I mentioned, across budgets, procurement processes, and audit processes is tracking of government expenditure. I'm not sure, I've forgotten. Open Transparency is that platform which was recently designed by governments, and I'm not sure if we have seen that platform. Basically, it supports identifying fiscal irregularities and the mismanagement of public funds. For those of us that have had the chance to look at that platform, it's quite strange where you see findings such as over, I think, permit me to say over 10 million, or if not, over 100 million. I think in some instances, over 100 million is being paid into individual public officials' accounts for organizing of conferences or organizing of trainings or participating in trainings, which is quite strange for how, even we know in the private sector and in civil society organization, there are policies which says like you can't, okay, if I'm going to take a loan, for instance, I can't take above my salary because the risk involved is that staff probably might resign or somehow they run away with your money. But you find out on that open transparency platform, it's an open transparency platform. This is why I made the submission earlier on about the difference between transparency and accountability. So the government has put up that platform. I think budget supports that platform to put up and upload transactions across government entities, and you see amazing things like somebody taking about over 100 million for a training in Kaduna or something like that. Then how do you manage such situations of accountability or providing the breakdown of the funds being spent? So it's important for all of us to also play a role in tracking government expenditure, and also supporting other civil society organizations like Budget, which uses technology to educate citizens on matters of public spending and empower them to use government budgets and data to demand improved service delivery. Another one around promoting transparency and accountability is whistleblowing, publicly reporting acts or acts of official misconduct when we find them. The African Center for Media and Information Literacy has launched that project, allowing people to anonymously report corruption. I'm not sure where the Whistleblowers Act has been all the while, but there has been a recent, I think I was following that, but I'm not sure I remember the person's name, in Cross River, I guess, who has also blown the whistle, but has not been protected. So while all of these strategies are working, we also have to understand like the pushback that comes with it and the risk that comes with working in this space as well. The last I would like to talk about is public interest litigation, which we have my friends and partner at SERAP who always sue the government every week because they are doing that work using the law to advance issues on human rights and equality, to raise issues on broader concerns around government spending, mismanagement of funds, and all of that. But yes, amazing people doing amazing work in the space, and including our friends at Policy Shapers. But we also try to encourage citizens to be active in the fights against corruption, to promote transparency and accountability. We've seen I'm not sure I want to speak about the government, but the Anti-Corruption Agency, one of the things we have found out recently is they are all mandated to do their job, but I'm not sure how their mandate plays out when they have to take permission or get approval from the president. So We are trying to do what's called like an advocacy to helping them understand their role is beyond the presidency or beyond the Nigerian government. But yes, you have been instituted to promote accountability and transparency by preventive methods or punitive methods, in whichever way works for them. But one of the things I will talk about later in a few minutes, I know I have limited time, it's about that personality and what we've seen across individuals rather than institutions working in these organizations. But broadly, civil society organizations and activists have demonstrated an ability to elevate and sustain transparency reforms on various political and policy agenda. Organizations have also been able to advance innovative solutions. Like I'm really excited about the policy hack, which is very, very, for me, one of the unique innovations which I've seen in recent times, thereby increasing the likelihood for reforms adoption. We can't wait for the outcome of the policy hack. Across, I'm still going to talk about four other things basically, which is education. It cannot be overemphasized that one of the preventive methods of corruption by promoting accountability and transparency is by educating Nigerians on these issues. There's need for citizens to be enlightened on governance processes in general. So at the lab and my own perspective as well, there's also a huge difference between politics and governance. So the process of elections is that politicking, but once they get into office, despite my candidate, despite your candidate, we need to understand governance processes and how to hold them accountable and demand accountability and ask questions. We all need to be enlightened on governance processes, decision-making processes, public policies, political culture, constitutional rights and responsibility. It may be surprising that some Nigerians still think, for instance, that the only way to participate in governance is by voting, which I just mentioned, which is a right many people still do not exercise by that way. So number one is exercising your rights during the voting process. Number two is also exercising your rights by demanding accountability from government officials. And this is why we say citizens need to be educated and they need to be active in this work we do. The next for me is another thing which, according to our accountability incubator, which we try to support, is grassroots engagement. So we support young people who have creative and exciting ideas and already working at the grassroots. So you find us all civil society. Nigeria is very huge. We need more people to work in the 774 local governments to do this and help us build up from grassroots. Change that happens from bottom to top is usually more effective at the grassroots, sustainable and measurable. The grassroots basically is local governments, the arm that directly affects community members. So it's only natural that change, action, and the demand for accountability should begin from there. A reference point to the success that grassroots engagement can achieve is the work of Ebenezer's policy hack. Then you have WaterAid, another young person we had supported to work around water in communities in Abuja. We also have Funke of sorry, I've forgotten her. Ebenezer, please remind me. I've forgotten Funke's organization. But yeah, she works at the grassroots as well to supporting.
She does justice. Hope behind bars.
Hope behind bars. Yes, so she does justice work to support citizens and imprisoned citizens. This has shown that there's tremendous power that community members can exert in mobilizing citizens, engaging with local authorities, same way Tracker has done, transforming their communities and improving lives of community members. Trying to rush through before I round off, before 10. Another key driver or tool which I see that is promoting transparency and accountability, which is still not being optimized, is the freedom of information. I'm just going to touch a bit on freedom of expression. Yes, we also, like I mentioned, there's also a clampdown, a pushback from the government once you are also doing the work on demanding accountability. A proper systems of checks and balances, not only between the different arms of government, but between public citizens and the government, can be the key to solving Nigerians' lack of accountability and transparency problems. which will undoubtedly lead to proper developments as a country. The Article 19, there's an organization called Article 19 working on human rights as well, not in Nigeria, but Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states, which seeks to receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of any frontier, is the fundamental right to information and expression, which every individual has. But we need to know how to use that. This was the premise on which the Freedom of Information Act was signed into law in 2011. Before this act was signed, all government information, like we know, is classified as top secret. You walk into offices and you find out files are like top secret or confidential, which is still something that the Open Government Partnership is still working largely on to push. Like I said, this has not been optimized, but yes, we find a few citizens who understand. That's why we talk about education of citizens earlier on. We need to build our capacity on this to help citizens understand this act is in existence. Government records that were to at least say, some of which were already in public circles, were still considered as confidential. And sharing of such information was considered as a criminal offense. But the FOI Act states that aside from being a human right, unlimited access to information can play a fundamental role in aiding development and also promoting accountability and transparency in Nigeria. This is an undeniable tool that can be used by the public, by the media, by academics, by civil society organizations, by you and I to keep government dealings and transactions in check. However, like I mentioned, it appears that it has not been taken into full advantage of. This might be due to the fact that Nigerians are either unaware of it or they seem to be discouraged of the bureaucratic nature of institutions in Nigeria. Yeah, more work needs to be done in educating Nigerians, and we also see, like I mentioned earlier on, another thing that might be useful for the policy hack is to help government MDAs understand their mandates and how they can take that up. For this kind of situation in educating citizens, there's the National Orientation Agency, the Ministry of Information, but you find out instead of educating citizens, we play politics with everything. But how do we begin to help them shape and be an independent organization beyond governments? I probably talk about the US. Yes, they have their challenges. I probably talk about the UK. But yes, you have people that can demand accountability, that can ask. There was this recent, I think it was a Trump's issue. I think I was watching one of those TV programs. I'm not sure what it's been called at the national desk. I think it was the Senate or National Assembly, where phone conversations were being put out there. So this is like being open to the public. This is being transparent. And how do we ensure government is playing such rules when we try to engage? But you find out the opposite is the situation. But I feel policy hack can play a huge role in changing this and educating citizens on their role as well. Last point from this is involvement of civil society organizations and support for civil society organizations, which we can't overemphasize. Many civil society organizations exist for the fight for democracy, for accountability and transparency in governance. Just to mention a few is, for me, top on my list, I would mention is Ebenezer's policy shapers with the innovation he has brought forth. You have CISLAC, you have Follow the Money, Hamza's Connected Development, Budgets, Enough is Enough, YAGA as well. We need to support ourselves. We need to support, citizens need to support these organizations beyond just funding. Getting involved and supporting the work of these organizations can improve and encourage the fight for accountability and transparency in Nigeria. Funding for me is quite tough and not something I really want to talk about in promoting this, but we need some flexibility. If there's any donor in the room, or if there's any citizen that wants to put your money in any of these organizations, please do. But yes, one key thing that drives our work that our work basically is the funding we received, and that motivation and passion which keeps us doing the work we do. Just to round off, accountability and transparency governance is attainable, is very, very attainable. But yes, we need to keep pushing. In recent time, we've seen authoritarianism in play. We've seen the justice being clamped down or being directed by the executive. But yes, accountability and transparency, we can push and achieve this. A few countries have made significant progress. If you look at every year, Transparency International releases the Corruption Perception Index. I always look at the top 5 or the top 10. Just in case I want to jackpot from Nigeria to know which countries are more accountable or are perceived as accountable countries. And I think for a number of years, I think Sweden, Finland, Norway have been at top of those lists. But yes, always be on the lookout because it's achievable and we can do that. It is through the individual and collective efforts of ordinary active citizens and accountable institutions and responsible leaders that we can build the governance we want. So let's get to work together, and we can see accountability and transparency in the work we do. I think I want to end there and hand over the mic back. But yes, we want an ethically reawakened by consensus of public ethical demands, training, reorientation, and which will result in rediscovery of virtues of honesty, integrity, and hard work across Nigerians and Nigerian citizens. Thank you very much. I will yield the mic back to Stephen. Thank you very much once again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Friday, for that insightful section. Indeed, accountability in governance is very, very achievable, but we require both our individual and collective efforts through hard work to make it happen. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom. I would now go back to our participants. If you have a question, please raise your hands. And then I'll give you the opportunity to ask a question. But if you don't want to speak, you can just put it in the chat box and I'll read it out so that Mr. Friday can help us with answer. Mr. Friday, there's a question here from Only. What is it with the Scandinavian country? Is there something we can learn from them?
Okay, thank you very much. Very good question. I like that word Scandinavian because yeah, they're always on. I think 5 countries from them are always on the top 10, always. And let me give you an instance. We have done some work with our Integrity Icon project to name and fame public officials and to supporting them as well with the Swedish embassy here in Nigeria. And I think it was in 2019, if not 2019, I guess. 2020 or 2019, they had to bring one of their media persons down to Nigeria for that purpose, to also share insights on how the Swedish government works. So the Swedish government has, if anybody has a better understanding, please, you can share as well. But the Swedish government has a platform where, as a lawmaker, you can't stay, for instance, let me give you an instance, let me make it more relatable in terms of Nigeria. You can't stay in Abuja. You can basically come to Abuja and stay for 2 weeks and go back to your community or from where that's where your house must be. It's like, this is where you reside, this is where you own your accommodation, this is where you do everything. So for instance, I'm from Benue State, I must go back to Benue, I must reside in Benue and keep that 2 weeks. Sittings happen, I think 3 days in the month. I can't remember, but sittings don't happen like almost every day, right? Like we have here Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and you have to be in the office Mondays or Fridays, and it's by choice, and they go on recess and all of that. But over there, you have to be in the city for 3 days, I guess, in a week or some. I can't remember basically, but you have to. If you have to buy a car, you must justify. Your accounts are open to the public to see, like, you earn ABCD, you can afford to buy a car. You use public, what do you call this thing? Dry cleaners. Trying to relate it to our context. A dry cleaner, you must use the dry cleaner like where everybody goes to. You can, if you do anything special, drive like Porsche cars, dine in the best restaurants, travels, you have to present your salary, how much you earn, or where did you get that money. You must account for it. So those are some instances which I think we can adapt, but this is like one of the hardest things to do in Nigeria if we don't change the policies. So like you see, somebody had, which there are different sides to every coin and how we think about these things. This is why I really commend Ebenezer and his team for this this event, and also the policy hack as well. Somebody had put up a bill in, I think it was the House of Assembly, about all of us, including me, every one of us, to school in Nigeria. Yes, I think I probably tilt to that direction. Why people feel like if I can earn more, or private sector people will earn more, you can. But yes, if you can justify your means or your earnings, then tell us how you're doing this. Paying for the best schools in US, or the best schools in UK, or the Ivy Leagues, or whatever. You need to be able to tell or justify it. So that's the way I've seen from that work in Sweden. You must be accountable to all your earnings, justify how you use public services, in terms of, if they probably just go on a train but not driving the best cars, and not being able to tell us where did you get the money from. So those are the kind of things we can now shift to seeing how policies can address in these things. So it serves all of us equally. The law doesn't serve us equally, like we know. So Nigeria can serve us equally. We can now start talking about equity, or equality, and all of that. So yeah, that's all I think.
Thank you very much for that answer. It's time, but let's take one last question from Caleb. Caleb, go ahead, please.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Odeh Friday. Thank you for your organization, because you've been working hard for transparency, accountability in our institutions here in Nigeria. Okay. For me, sir, I'm more concerned about the grassroots. Hello? I'm more concerned about the grassroots. Now, Nigeria is a very vast country, and we have a lot of places whereby these people can be reached. Now, I want to ask, how can we make these our leaders more accountable, whereby maybe there's a constituency project, for instance, maybe in my own local government, and I don't have the process or where I can make sure those constituency projects are being reported. People now these days have fear in reporting some of these issues. Now, how can we make this leaders accountable through this process? What are the processes, or what are the awareness we need to tell people that yes, we can make our leaders or our representatives accountable? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caleb. Just to jump back at you, one of the things I keep saying as well, and every other civil society organization that works around this accountability space, is active citizenship. I'll share an insight. It's more like a challenge. If we start addressing some behaviors, which I believe strongly in, by educating citizens, it might be helpful. If you look at maybe Ebenezer and all of us that work around the Naija data axis will understand. So we had conducted a couple of trainings in Akwa Ibom and Rivers. When we got there, we had invited public servants for that training to also enlighten them. And we also had community meetings, town hall meetings. But one of the findings that came out was an event that was supposed to start for maybe 9 a.m. or 10 at most. We didn't start almost till like 11 or 12, because you need to incentivize the participants. So there's also a sense of entitlement mentality which we need to change. The same thing with the elections. That is why you find out Nigerians talking about vote buying or vote selling. The first thing you ask yourself, how did we get to that position? But how do we begin to change some of these things to ensure people understand? Now, going back to an example is Tracker. Tracker has made some great efforts, made some great gains and progress around their Tracker work, where they're engaging citizens at the grassroots in terms of tracking constituency projects and demanding accountability around these same things. So you find out some of their findings is politicians get constituency money from national budgets and tag these projects as their own personal project, which is wrong. But citizens don't even understand that budget is public funds, right? So how do we begin to help people understand what public funds is, what your role is in the society, in your community, and also demanding like the funds that are meant for your community serve your own purpose rather than personal interests, personal political interest. So we need to continue to do that engagement. We can't stop, right? But we need to continue to help people to understand their role in their communities. One of the things we do at the lab is also trying to engage community leaders, like youth leaders, try to help them understand the connection they have within the community and their leaders, to also build that same trust within them so they can demand what belongs to them. One key thing which I also want to encourage all of us to look at is the Petroleum Industry Act, which has been passed. There's 3% which has been provided for communities, oil producing communities. But if we don't continue to engage our community members or our colleagues, our friends at the communities where oil is being produced, we will now revert to the same thing that happened with the 13% derivation fund, where one state governor can decide to do whatever he or she wants to do with the money or the funds, or the same thing that happens with I see. Well, I probably must commend the church that the Cross River State governor went to, where they said he was going to donate 25 million. And the parishioner, the priest said, no, you have to take that money to go and pay salaries. So when you begin to help people understand the basics and how it is public funds and how they also have a voice. I said this initially at the introduction, where our voices are not heard, but some people who have voices, we need to speak out. Those people that need to speak out need to also enlighten other people to also raise their voice. So we also can understand the role of collective action in all of this, promoting transparency and accountability. I hope this helps.
Thank you very much. Mr. Friday, is it okay if we take one last question? There's one question in the chat box.
Yes, please go ahead. Let me see if, okay.
All right. Accountability and information dissemination. Would you agree that all information be made public for accountability's sake? If yes, do you think if we really know all that is to this country, our skin won't crawl?
That's interesting question. Thank you, Oluwatosin. So I'll give you a scenario in my office. We were installing this man, just to give you a sense of understanding of what this looks like, and how this links to Nigerian behaviors. So we were installing, what do you call this thing? Security cameras in the office. And when they came to me, I'm like, oh, we need to put all of these cameras in every office. The person said, the reaction was like, no. Like, I was taken aback, like, why not? So this goes to all of us that have traveled out to a couple of countries. Then if you look at, I'm not saying there's some security cameras in these countries, right? But if you look at some of these countries, they've moved to the stage where offices have window blinds, yes, but you have open door policies. You have transparent glasses. You can see through. So people are not there watching Facebook or YouTube when they're supposed to be working. Behavioral problems, right? So this takes me back to the question on all information. I wouldn't agree to absolutes. I wouldn't agree, honestly, I wouldn't. Yes. Oh, thank you very much. The transparency paradox. I came across that recently. But let me finish this out. Maybe you can talk about that as well. So if you take that back to the Nigerian context, which I don't agree 100% all, but however, you find out what has happened in recent time in authoritarianism in Nigeria. People hide under this information, or how do they say that thing? And please, it's a matter of national security. So we cannot do this. Then you're paying ransom, using Nigerian money to pay ransom. But you didn't tell us, right? So how do we differentiate between a matter of national security and security surveillance? Another thing is security surveillance. Another thing is censorship, internet censorship, which are hiding underneath. All of these things are hiding underneath. It is a matter of national interest, which I feel yes, information should be made public, but we need to know how to ensure that this information that are put out in the public are in the best interest of Nigerians, and this is what they need to know. And oh yes, on a need to know basis, and all of that. But like I said, this is a tricky question, but for me, I don't agree to 100%, but 99.9% of information should be transparent, so people can just live an open life. I don't know why we don't want to live an open life. Just maybe that should be the question. There are things that are personal to me, yes, but public officials, public documents, it's why there's a reason why it's called public and public officials, please. I probably want to make a reference to a situation that happened when the president was sick a couple of years ago. I'm not sure that information, so maybe we can start to debate on what kind of information instead of all information, right? He traveled and used public funds, and we were told it was private travel. Like, how can you use public funds to do private? So all of those things, where do we create a balance in all of this? But yes, I can't pronounce that name. Sorry, I'm not. Well, I just call you Shola. You can talk about the transparency paradox. I'll be glad, please.
Oh, it's just fine. Thank you, Mr. Odeh. I was actually at the BI training organized by the PIC, I think like 2 months ago, and I know you mentioned it too.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh yeah. Thank you for pulling back there.
Bring that up. But then I totally agree with you in terms of not all information, because take for instance the security issue you mentioned. If the operations, for instance, if bandits or whatever it is that they are called, if they succeed in an operation, we probably wouldn't hear of it, or rather we would hear of it, but the ones that they don't succeed at are the ones that we really don't hear about. Imagine that the security forces are telling us all of the attempts that bandits have made, to cause commotion in the country. It will probably scare so many people, and we'll just be living every day of our lives in fear. So I think it's about what information should be made public and what shouldn't be made public. So I totally agree with you.
Thank you, Oyin. Mr. Friday, any final words?
Yes, thank you very much for this great opportunity. And Oyin or Shola, please, thank you for reminding me. This was a good pointer for me. And I really want to thank the Policy Shapers team on behalf of Ebenezer. This is great stuff. We should keep our voices loud where we can and speak around these issues. I think we all play a huge role. This was when I also realized, like I did in my introduction, was the point where I worked initially. It's a gap which all of us needs to feel or feed. You might not be in the right place at the moment, but as you continue to do the work you do, you understand it clearly. Initially was for me like earning a salary, keeping myself. Yes, I still do that to keep my family right, but the second point of it is, how do you contribute to the betterment of Nigeria, to the development of Nigeria? So you probably identify that soon. And once you identify that, please take up that space and try to see how you can collaborate. These things can be done by one person. We've seen that, and that has been proven around the accountability and transparency space. That's why I also emphasized on collective action. But yes, let's do this together. Let's raise our voices and ensure we're active citizens, so we can support responsible leaders in order to build accountable institutions. But thank you very much for listening to me. And Ebenezer, thank you for this opportunity once again. Keep up the great job, and congrats to your team.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Friday. Thank you for honoring our invitation, and thank you for spending the precious time this morning with us and our participants. Let me hand over to Ebenezer to officially give. Iben, are you there?
Oh, yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Let me hand over
really appreciate Guys, Odeh is a young person like us, even though he says he's not a young person. he's obviously working with so many young people through Accountability Lab, and they're doing really amazing job, just ensuring that young people are included in the process of governance. So the only announcement I have, because of our time, is that we have shared yesterday the tip sheet for the hackathon, for